Nick Krall is nowhere near the hot seat. We're going to tell you why on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have been podcasting about this team for a combined 14 seasons, and we're glad that you're alongside us here today. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Cincinnati Reds, every single day, and we're glad that you're here. Along on today's podcast, we've got a lot coming for you about Elly making his second All-Star game, and dude barely old enough to buy alcohol. And we're going to tell you why Andrew Abbott was snubbed, and it's criminal. He might still make it because of injuries, but it's criminal he's not on the initial list. That's coming up later on in today's show. This weekend showed us a couple of good things about Chase Burns and a couple of bad things about CES. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. But I want to start today's episode with what we are looking at here, the draft, the trade deadline, and a crazy move made by the Washington Nationals. What does this all mean when we look at Nick Krall? That's coming up on today's episode. This is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Steve, this is a critical time for this Reds team. They are exactly where we thought they'd be, and they're set up for a nice run this week that, quite frankly, if they go 5-2 like we expect them to do, there is no reason why the front office should sit on its hands during this trade deadline. I know they're going to wait till after the draft before any moves happen, that other teams don't have the appetite for making a trade really before the draft happens. That's not Nick Krall's fault. But if he goes through this trade deadline and there's not a significant addition made to the bullpen, and there's not a significant addition made to the outfield, then we will be talking about the fact that the Reds are once again probably going to miss an opportunity.
Yeah, they've actually done better than what we asked them to do. If you rewind before this gauntlet of the schedule came about, Jeff, you and I were both in agreement. They just needed to be 500. Be 500 or close to it. And we meant it could be a game or two under 500, and this would still work.
Give or
but
take.
Here we are. The gauntlet is done. We're heading into 7 games against the Rockies and the Marlins before the All-Star break, and the Reds sit at 46-44 as we record. 2 games over 500. If they go 5-2, they head into the All-Star break 51-46. It would be, I'll just say it, Jeff, it would be absolutely criminal if this team sits on its hands. If they head into the All-Star break, that many games over 500, that much of a real possibility to compete for a wild card, and they do nothing, they don't go get a bullpen arm, they don't go get a right-handed outfielder that can hit for a little bit of pop. Those are the 2 things this team needs. And you can talk all you want about getting healthy, and you can talk all you want about, well, Hunter Green's coming back. Nothing that's cooking in the system right now fixes the need for an additional quality bullpen arm or a right-handed bat with pop. Nothing is sitting around on a shelf that Nick Krall's just like, all right, now it's time to deploy. The Reds don't have it. They need to go get it, because this, if you watch this team closely, is a legitimate wild card team. This is a team that could get to the postseason and make some noise.
And needs a little bit of help, though. And like you mentioned, the whole get healthy mantra, that's something we've heard from Nick Krall a couple of times now. And it's possible he is just deferring, deflecting the question whenever somebody asks him what the Reds' plans for the trade deadline are. And there's something that's going on that he just wants to hold close to the vest and he's not going to tell anybody about. I get that. But he is saying the same things that he said in the past. And that is what is so concerning. And I've heard some folks ask, and some folks even say, that they believe this is the last draft and the last trade deadline for Nick Krall if he doesn't get it right. And quite frankly, that just doesn't seem to be the case. And it's not because we're going to sit here and say that Nick Krall has been perfect with his moves. He has made mistakes, but his bosses operate on a different plane than other teams, because I'm sure there's folks that are looking at the news from the Washington Nationals side of things. They just fired their GM who's been with them for 16 years, and they fired him a week before they pick number 1 overall in the draft. And so there's a tendency to believe, hey, man, nobody is safe in a front office when it comes to Major League Baseball. Nick Krall is safer than most.
Yeah, he's doing it. You look at a Major League president of operations or GM and what their job description is, and we think we know what that is, right? You go, you build a winning team, you compete, you win a World Series. And the only measure of a successful season is winning the World Series. That's how we all came up and what is success in this sport. That is no longer the case in many, many markets in this sport, Cincinnati being one of them. The measure of success is, here's your job description, Nick Krall, from the Castellinis. Are you checking the boxes? The boxes are put some butts in the seat, keep the team as exciting as possible while only spending this much money so that I make this much money. And Nick Krall is checking every single one of those boxes. He has collected an exciting group of players. There's a lot of young talent on this team. People are coming out to the ballpark to watch it. The national talking heads are talking about it, and Phil and Bob are making their money. So Nick Krall is probably getting an excellent review in his performance appraisal because Phil has got cash heavy in his pockets.
Yeah, because when you look at Spot Track, we like to look at Spot Track to give us the information when it comes to payrolls and things like that. And they don't have like everything because no team makes their payroll public. I think there's like 1 or 2 of them that do.
Part of the Atlanta Braves budget is out there because they because of certain situations with their ownership, but right. They're the only one.
But the Reds don't, and so because we rely on what Spot Track has to say, and according to Spot Track, the Reds are 23rd in cash as far as like cash spent on the roster. So that's exactly where this ownership group wants to be. It's over 100 million. So there's a lot of folks that are just like, we'll get to 100 million. Yeah, the Reds are there. They're there. They're in that nice little safe bubble that a lot of fans like to create, this arbitrary area of payroll. But they're also far below the average Major League payroll. They're far below the top spenders. They'll never be a top spender, and I understand that. But it feels as though that financials are the first priority, and Nick Krall 100%. Has met that priority. Nick Krall has checked that box. So as much as success on the field is what you and I and everyone else in Reds country is looking for, that is secondary to this ownership group. So understand that if you, God forbid, Nick Krall makes just the dumbest trade you ever heard of, like the NBA version or the MLB version of the Luka Doncic trade, he's going to keep his job. And it's not because of merit based on wins and losses. It's because of merit that we do not see as fans.
And I want to piggyback off of that just for a second, Jeff, because I'm sure there's going to be someone in the comment section that asks, well, then why did they fire David Bell? Why did David Bell get held accountable for wins and losses, and they went and got Francona? Well, it checks some of those other boxes that are on Nick Krall's expectation list. Keep things exciting, keep things interesting, keep people interested. Nick Krall made that decision in order to say, we're taking this young group of talent. We don't think David Bell's moving them forward. We think Terry Francona is going to move them forward. That checks those boxes without really spending that much more money, keeping the Reds within budget, keeping that box checked, keeping the Castellinis happy. So that's the difference. While the manager can be held to wins and losses by the president of baseball operations, Nick Krall's not being held to that standard because he's meeting the financial metrics. So it's it's 2 different categories now where I get, baseball used to be just the one category, right? The manager was held accountable for the wins and losses. The general manager was held accountable for the wins and losses. And the president of baseball operations was held accountable as well. It's just not like that anymore.
Wins are expensive, Steve. And the Reds are good enough to win enough for what they pay. And that's exactly what the mantra is right now when it comes to this front office. Make no mistake about it. I think Nick Krall makes some good moves. I'm not saying everything that he does is completely glossed over, but what he does is not the same as what AJ Preller does for the San Diego Padres or what Mike Rizzo did for the Washington Nationals. That's a different level. And that's why we really, really want this trade deadline. We really, really want this MLB draft to be a success, but Nick Krall is not on any kind of hot seat here. This is something that I think we as Reds fans need to understand from a different level and a different angle from the wins and losses side of things.
Well, listen, Jeff, we know Nick Krall is not on the hot seat, but we know the Reds are coming off of a less than stellar or spectacular series out in the city of brotherly love. They dropped 2 of 3 to Philadelphia, but Chase Burns was a little bit better, and we've got to wonder what to do with CES, and we're going to talk about both of those things coming up next. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. It helps you keep track of what you're actually spending. Have you ever looked at your bills and realized very quickly how much you're spending on fast food, or how much you're spending down at the ballpark, or how much you're spending and not even realizing? It's so easy to just tap that card. Well, with Monarch Money, it's going to pull it all into one place so you can see exactly what you are spending. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Make sure you are subscribed. That way you don't miss any of the great Reds content we've got coming your way. Jeff and I here Monday through Friday on the Mothership, the Locked On Reds podcast. Tim Daniel after each and every Reds game with the Reds live postcast, plus whatever little surprises we drop in along the way. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click that notification bell so you get it all. All right, Jeff, less than stellar series over the weekend out in Philadelphia. But there is at least a bit of some brightness in the way that Chase Burns bounced back. Now, he didn't get through 5 full innings. He had some bumps. There were some things. But the most important part of what I wanted to see from Chase Burns in that next start after being blown up was, how did he come back? Did he come back overthrowing, overly aggressive, trying to change everything that he does? Or did he come back and find a way to be him while maybe correcting whatever was going on in the start before, where he was tipping pitches? I was happy with what we saw overall from him in this bounce back start after being absolutely demolished.
Yeah, his ability to sort of scramble a bit as far as like a season goes was proven on Sunday, because even he had a little bit of a carryover from that Red Sox start in that the first 2 Phillies batters that he faced reached base. And so you're thinking, oh my gosh, here we go again. And then boom, Harper strikeout, and he strikes out the side in that first inning after the first 2 guys reach. And I thought that was really impressive because, you know, you constantly keep thinking, all right, you got runners on first and base, hopefully you get a pop up and a ground ball. And Chase Burns was like, hold my beer, I'm going to strike out the side. Now, I will say this was a tough start for him in that he had to throw a lot of pitches, but that Phillies lineup is stacked. And that's the kind of outing that a young pitcher can expect to have against those types of dudes. But he pitched amazingly considering the circumstances. I felt like 75% of the strikes that he threw were just foul balls that the Phillies just constantly would extend at bats with. And you got to tip your cap. There's a lot of tip in your cap this weekend to the Phillies, especially Zach Wheeler, but you got to tip your cap to the lineup. But I tip my cap even harder to Reds pitching as a whole, because they kept up with Zach Wheeler as much as they possibly could until the very end, whenever Tony Santillan ends up giving up that 2-run home run. But Chase Burns was a big part of that. And at least for those first 5 innings, it kind of felt like he held his own against a dude that was absolutely in control in Zach Wheeler.
Yeah. And you know, I when I texted you, after that game, like, I'm not even mad. Right. Wheeler's going to Wheeler. It's just going to be, it is what it is. But, there are still some concerns, even though it was Zach Wheeler. Let's talk about CES. Let's talk about the CES. Let's talk about the CES in the room for a minute, Jeff, because what do you do with him moving forward? Are you still just keep running him out there and doing the same old things? Like, what do you do?
Well, the tough part is he's not the best first baseman on the roster. And you could make the argument he's not the best DH on the roster, and he's certainly not the best third baseman on the roster. In fact, I think Santiago Espinal might be ahead of him. But I know for sure Noelvi Marte is ahead of both of them. So he's going to get the lion's share of the playing time at third. It should be Espinal in the depth chart next to that. And I'd also argue that Gavin Lux probably should get a look at third base before CES gets another look at third base. Make no mistake about it. That one play that he made was one play. That the error that we're talking about where there's a ground ball it's definitely shading more to the shortstop side than it is to the third base side. And Elly's going to pick up and scoop and try and make a really good throw to get the guy at first. For some reason, CES's mind left his body and he ran across the field, cut off Elly. They were both worried about running into each other, so nobody picks up the ball, and then you got everybody safe on the base. And it's all because that is it's a dumb play. I'm sorry, it's dumb. It's not an error. It's not a miss. It's dumb. And when you start making dumb plays, you start telling me that you don't belong at that position. So we're back to first base and DH for CES, and he is not the top dude at either one of those positions. I have a hard time seeing regular playing time for him right now.
Yeah, I'm not ready to give up on him at third base completely because he has shown some flashes. There have been some plays where you're like, he can handle this position. He can play this spot. But you're right. Mental lapses in judgment. But we see this too. I get frustrated with that same statement that you just made. I can apply to things that Elly does at shortstop from time to time. So does that mean we move Elly off of shortstop? Well, I know you want to. I don't. So I think that maybe we just have a little bit of patience. You have to remember that he's only played in 35 games this year. He's only played in 35 games this year. Those are during the games. They're interrupted in between. He's not been out there all the time. But you're also not wrong in that he's not the best first baseman on the team. He's not the best DH on the team. If Noelvi Marte goes back towards what he was before he got hurt, he's the odd man out.
He is, and now, I mean, the Reds just made a move today before Monday's game where they sent down Rhys Hines and brought up Connor Joe. He's back from hand, foot, and mouth disease. But, I mean, Rhys Hines was really showing some rough stuff here recently, so I'm not really that mad at that. But that means that if there's another move to be made, the next guy to be sent down is probably CES. Like, you could maybe see it be Connor Joe if it's a move for an outfielder, but CES is kind of on that block right now. And I'm wondering a little bit, Steve, because it is about the power with him. That's why he's here. Like, he can change the game in one swing. And there's not a lot of guys in this organization that can do that. But it has just been so few and far between. Like, if it weren't for his grand slam in Boston right now, what are we talking about production-wise for him recently? It's not a lot. So that's the tough thing for me, where it's like, we saw a good bounce back from Chase Burns. We're happy about that. And I have a question about that I want to ask after I finish my CES point. But for CES, I'm just starting to wonder if he is able to prove that he can be a asset to this team right now, or if it's something he needs to go down to AAA and get his timing back. I don't even know that it's a timing thing. I think it's kind of where we were with Matt McClain, where it's like he just needs to see the ball hit the grass a little bit. And it's not doing that right now for him.
Are you willing to experiment with him in right field? The Reds kicked the tires on that a couple times. He's played very minimal, 2-3 games total in the outfield, but he has played out there. Are you willing to kick the tires on him being a right-handed platoon to Will Benson?
I am not bullish about that. I think that Connor Joe is a better fielder by a mile than CES, which is rough because Connor Joe doesn't have that good of an arm. And I think CES probably has a better arm, but it's like the understanding of right field, taking the right route to a ball and really seeing a ball well. That is not something that you just do. You've got to have reps for. So I think we're talking more about, okay, he's got to have more time over there. Like, feels like he has to have more time at third base for me to feel confident with him, but I don't want to see that right now. And this would be starting over, putting him out right. I don't know that I feel
I'll say this. If they send him down, if they send him to Louisville, if that actually happens, put him in the outfield and let him start getting reps out there.
Do that. Yes, I agree with that. And the other thing with me, and going back to Chase Burns for just a minute before we get out of this segment, I think that he's the guy that gets sent down to AAA whenever Hunter Green is healthy and Hunter Green is starting a rehab assignment here soon. Is it something that the Reds should limit his innings in AAA with the idea that he could be an asset for them out of the bullpen down the stretch?
No. I don't think you do anything to change what you're doing with Chase Burns.
That slider is nasty, man.
It is,
that
but,
weapon needs to be
also,
in the big.
You still might get Rhett Lauder back. There's other things cooking in the system. This is his first year of professional ball. Let's not
leave it at a cup of coffee and just
let's not mess around with his routines. Let's not mess around with his progression programs. Let's not mess around with what they're doing with him. Chase Burns is going to compete to be a permanent member of the starting rotation starting next spring training. Let's not mess with that. Just do what we're going to do with him and then see him in Goodyear. This was a nice, cup of coffee, nice exposure to the big league level. Now take what you've learned, go refine it, and be ready to steal a spot from somebody next year. That's what I do with Chase Burns.
Much better looking cup of coffee for Chase Burns than for Chase Petty. That's for sure. All right, coming up next, let's talk about Elly making another all-star team because Elly is awesome. And Andrew Abbott, man, what's he got to do? If you can't watch us on YouTube, you can always listen to us on your favorite podcasting app or seriously on every single one of them there is. Also, make sure you check out Tim Daniel on the postcast after every Reds game, going live at the end of the final out, and then he'll be on your audio feed shortly thereafter. All right, Steve, great news, and that Elly was going to make the all-star team. Quite frankly, I think we could have put that one in the books about a month ago and just said, yeah, he's going to be an all-star. I did see, so apparently this was player voting. This wasn't Dave Roberts appointed. This wasn't like a managerial appointee from the all-star manager. This was player voted, and players actually voted him as the second guy, right behind Francisco Lindor, who's going to be starting. The fans had voted Mookie Betts as the second guy. He did not make it in there. And I find it intriguing that Elly was the number 2 guy based on players picking, because I remember, I think it was it either beginning of this year or late last year, according to his peers, he was voted as one of the most overrated players or overhyped players. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really awesome to see the change. It's not just how good he has been this year, but also how his peers view him, in that they're like, dude, we see how good this guy is, and he absolutely deserves to be on the all-star team.
I mean, let's just check in with where he is right now, Jeff. He's got 90 games played. He doesn't take a day off. 18 home runs. He's on pace between 30 and 40 home runs.
His off days are a DH.
Right. His stolen base numbers thus far, he's at 22. He could pick that up a bit as his legs get more and more healthy. He still could get to 40 or 50 steals on the season with 30 to 40 home runs. He's good right now for 3.1 in WAR. He's going to have a 5 WAR season at a minimum. He's going to get to
maybe
5
6.
So
yeah.
Maybe 6. So, you're definitely into the trail ends of the MVP conversation. It's going to be hard for anybody not named Shohei to win the MVP, but Elly should at least be in that conversation. You're right. We could have started talking about all-star selection Elly months ago. And I do find it interesting that the player's opinion of him has turned around, but I think that as much as we hyped Elly has gone out and played in a way that's earned him the respect of his peers. And it's really good to see.
He's taken a step forward in an area that I think everybody was like, this might take a few years. Like, his plate discipline and his pitch recognition have just gotten exponentially better ever since his call-up, but even just year over year. I mean, his strikeout rate is down, his walk rate is up, and we've talked about this before. The number that says that he gets lucky, a number that is typically higher than league average, isn't even as high as it was last year, and he still has a higher batting average this year than he did last year. I honestly think that this is who he is as a hitter. I think he's a 275 hitter, and if you're talking about a 275 hitter with like a 350 on base for Elly, like, he is always going to be around that 6 WAR range, especially if he can clean up the defense. If he cleans up the defense, he might be 8 or 9 WAR guy, and then you're talking about the base running on top of this. This is who we thought he would be. He would be a transcendent player that the rest of the league recognizes as one of its superstars, not just a best player for the Reds type guy, but one of the arguably best players in the National League and all of Major League Baseball.
Well, as good as Elly has been on the offensive and position player side, Andrew Abbott has been just as good on the pitching side of things. And yet he is ignored. He is snubbed.
Yes.
Not in the conversation. I don't know. I think you said it best. What does this guy have to do? 7-1 in 15 starts. He has a complete game shutout under his belt in an era where you don't get complete game shutouts very often anymore. 83 2/3 innings pitched, Jeff. His strikeout per nine's at 8.4. He's not mowing guys down, but he's striking out a fair amount. And his walks per nine is under 3. It's at 2.4. He also, shockingly, unexpectedly, when the Reds needed someone to do it most, stepped up and became the ace we didn't know we had. With Hunter Green on the injured list, the Nick Lodolo being Jekyll and Hyde, good and bad, right? The roller coaster ride that is Nick Lodolo. Someone needed to step up and fill that role. Nobody had Andrew Abbott as that guy at the beginning of the season, but yet here he is as that guy. I'm just going to come out and say it. There are guys that are on this all-star team that were picked that he is just much better than. And I get the rules with the selections and everybody's got to have a rep and all of the things, but you could have found a way to get Andrew Abbott on this team. And you're right. It still could happen. As we get closer to the game, a pitcher always drops out. It always happens. So I'll be interested to see if we revisit this conversation with a last minute all-star selection for Andrew Abbott. But the fact that he's not on this initial listing, this initial group, kind of boggles my mind a little bit.
I mean, if he gets that appointment, I will be really happy for him, but there's going to be the Reds, the diehard Reds part of me that's going to be waving a little Reds flag going, woo-hoo, he made the all-star team. Should have been on the initial list, and he's better than Matthew Boyd. I can single out one guy. You can make arguments for a couple of different players, and look, he was never going up against Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw was appointed by the commissioner for his lifetime of good baseballing, and that's what you do. You just, when you're that way, that's what happened to Albert Pujols a couple of years ago. He got put on the team just because he's been really, really good for his entire career. So it was never Andrew Abbott versus Clayton Kershaw, but Andrew Abbott versus Matthew Boyd. Abbott wins that debate. And I'm not talking about what happened last night, Sunday night baseball, when Matthew Boyd dominated the Cardinals. He was picked to the All-Star game before that outing. Before that outing happened, Steve, Andrew Abbott had 2.9 WAR, according to Baseball Reference. And Matthew Boyd had 1.7. I don't even need to look at the other numbers. 1.7 WAR, and you pick this guy over Andrew Abbott? That's an absolute travesty. And I get it. He's thrown 15 more innings whenever they made this choice. But quantity does not oversell quantity in this case. And I really think that this was a big-time miss. And I think it was, I can't remember if it's manager appointment for pitchers or if that was based on player voting as well. They change it every other year.
I think the managers pick the pitchers. If I've got it right in my head still.
It's a big miss that Andrew Abbott's not on the National League All-Star team. And I think we will end up seeing him there. I think he will make it because I think Chris Sale is dealing with some sort of nagging injury and he's probably going to turn down the appointment. But I think it's the initial list that Andrew Abbott should have been on, even though he may very well be on the final list, that I'm still going to be a little bit we're going to watch the game, and I'm just going to be sitting there just you left this guy off the initial list, huh? How about that?
I want to say something real quick about that commissioner appointment, Clayton Kershaw. I love that they did that. This is not a new idea, and this is not a Manfred idea either. If you go back to when this first started happening, they appointed Cal Ripken and Tony Gwynn in the same year to celebrate their careers because they were both retiring. And it led to a really great moment with Alex Rodriguez forcing Cal Ripken to move over to shortstop when he comes onto the field. And then Cal Ripken homers in that all-star game. So you get great moments. It's great to see the legends out there. I like that we'll get to see Kershaw on the mound for this. He deserves to be out there. It'll probably be, a big moment for him and a fun moment for baseball. So I love that. But I do recall when they did it with Tony Gwynn and Cal Ripken, those were extra players on the team. They didn't take up a spot on the roster. And so I would have maybe liked to seen them figure that out a little better.
This is not something that they do every year. And in fact, this isn't even something that he did for both leagues. He just did Clayton Kershaw this year. There's not an American League legend pick, and they didn't have one last year. I think the last time a legend pick was used was in 2022 with Albert Pujols and with Miguel Cabrera as well. So to see like things like that, I'm with you. I like that, because if there's any sport that knows how to celebrate its own history, it's baseball, and they do a good job of celebrating career achievements, and not just, they understand that there's certain points in guys' careers where they're not going to make the all-star team based on the season that they're playing in currently, but they are an all-star in perpetuity.
All right, Jeff, I think that is a great spot to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Reds your first listen each and every day. Make sure you go check out the Locked On MLB channel. Lots of great stuff happening over there as your second listen. Not only do you get Sully, Paul Francis Sullivan, telling you about baseball from a national perspective, but also in that feed each and every night, MLB Game Night, where they're watching every single game so that you don't have to, bringing in the reports from around the league from all of the experts of the Locked On MLB podcast network. So make sure you go check that out. We'll be back in your feeds tomorrow talking about the Marlins and hopefully a Reds win. We'll gather up all the news, the reports, the rumors, the information, and keep you locked on Reds every single day.
I dropped in perpetuity in a baseball podcast. I'm pretty good at this.
I'm so glad that Hooked on Phonics worked for you.